We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's July 10th here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yeun, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning, Yeun.
Good morning, and Park Ki-hoon.
Happy Monday!
Happy Monday! Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. A new social media app emerged last Wednesday. It's a text-based app called Threads, made by the company Meta. In just 2 days, 70 million people signed up, which the company's CEO Mark Zuckerberg said was beyond his expectations. Industry analysts attributed Threads' popularity to its convenience. Instagram users can sign up with a single tap, and many say it could be a potential replacement for Twitter. And moving on, we're now heading towards the peak of summer, but it seems that not a lot of Koreans are planning to go abroad or even nearby for vacation because of burdensome travel expenses. Online survey company PMI asked 3,000 people aged 20 to 69 if they have summer vacation plans. 4 out of 10 said no, another 4 said they haven't planned anything yet. Many of those in their 20s and 30s said they couldn't go this summer because it was hard to find the right timing and because it seems costly. And staying with what's happening in Korea, the Ministry of Economy and Finance said it would consider increasing the threshold for taxes on inheritance from parents when they give their children financial gifts when they get married. Officials thought exempting tax burdens when newlywed children receive money gifts or financial support from parents could urge more young people to get married and hence raise birth rates. Currently, the Finance Ministry is considering exempting the tax on money gifts that parents give to newlyweds within 2 years of them trying to tie the knot. Now, we're going to take a closer look at the last story. It's been attracting a lot of attention because it comes down to our taxes. Currently, South Korea's inheritance tax-free limit is set at 50 million won, which is around $38,000. If parents give more than this amount to their children as inheritance within 10 years, they could be taxed up to 50% of what they give out. Now, this is also a significant move given that South Korea hasn't updated its inheritance tax system for 23 years. But because officials haven't specifically defined what wedding expenses are and how much could be overlooked as not part of an inheritance, they're deciding to give out more details towards the latter of this year. While this seems to be an ideal measure, it has stirred some controversy, right, Ki-hoon?
Definitely. I mean, first of all, this only applies to newlyweds whose parents are capable of giving at least, 50,000 million won.
Yeah.
And that's not the case for me, unfortunately. And at the same time, I think this move from the Ministry of Economy and Finance is kind of only benefiting the more privileged people, rather than the general population.
Right.
And I don't think this is a reason for the low fertility rate here in Korea. And also, newlyweds who are living in houses by paying monthly rent, 월세, and those who have already bought a house by taking out a huge mortgage loan are not eligible for this tax reduction by this reform. So I'm not sure how this will encourage more people to get married and increase the birth rate in turn. And so I think this is just my personal intake. Starting with making purchasing and owning your own house a bit more affordable, especially here in Seoul and the metropolitan area, and also for women to have more support from the government and the company they're working in to take maternity leaves, because I think many women these days fear of being replaced when they come back from the maternity leave. So this would obviously help more women not to just get married, that's the first step, but having kids, right? And I think that's the main reason why women are reluctant to have kids, because they're missing out, and it's hard to come back to the workforce once they have a kid.
So you're saying that society as a whole should change, starting with company welfare policies and making it easier for us to find a house, rather than make this lucrative policy only for the privileged part of the society here in Korea. But where do you stand on this issue, Ji-hee? There seems to be a lot of arguments, and Ki-hoon made a very compelling one right now. Where do you stand?
Well, I'm also for the new measure, though, because this will help out with newlywed couples who need support and whose parents can really provide the financial support for these people. However, I don't think this will necessarily be an effective measure in solving the issue of low marriage and low birth rates. Like Ki-hoon said, we need a social effort in all parts of society to solve these issues fundamentally. family. But I mean, many choose not to get married or give birth because of economic, financial reasons, because of their careers. They are missing out, especially women. But then I do think it definitely is a step forward to resolving the issue, although it's not a fundamental solution.
There doesn't seem to be a causality or correlation, but it does seem to be a new move going in the right direction because, as I mentioned before, we haven't changed up the inheritance tax system for 23 years. So a lot of people are welcoming this measure, hoping that there could be better development there. And that was our news feed for this Monday. Let's now move on to our discussion topic of the day. Statistics Korea releases an annual report showing how many people found jobs. Back in April, they found that the number of young adults who found a stable job actually decreased. To find out more, take a look at the screen.
Young adults don't seem to have stable jobs compared to the older generation. As a matter of fact, Statistics Korea found that the number of young adults aged 15 to 29 who had a secure full-time job in March decreased by over 40,000 compared to a year earlier. Meanwhile, those who had a temporary or part-time job jumped by over 20,000. Most found part-time jobs in restaurants or accommodation services. But some also found manual labor or industrial jobs. Today, NewsGen aims to look deeper into this phenomenon by answering 3 questions. 1. Why are a growing number of young people doing manual work? 2. There seem to be many related accidents at the workplace. Why so? 3. How should South Korea better protect people working in dangerous fields of work?
Unfortunately, we see so many accidents in the workplace, and what's particularly upsetting is that even though we're living in times with advanced technology and high awareness of safety, we still see so many industrial accidents. And Sihi, why don't you just tell us how common these accidents are here in Korea?
Well, these are really common because on news we hear all these tragic accidents almost every month, although they're not covered in detail all the time. If we take a look at the number of the occupational fatalities in South Korea, first of all, though, it's 0.43%. For 3 per 10,000 people, that is. And although the figure is low for the country, it still ranks 34th in the 38 different member states of the OECD. And the OECD average is 0.29, so South Korea stands very high compared to the average, really. And while Korea's industrial accident fatality rate did not show much improvement, if we take a look at the other countries' rates, they did drop significantly in 2020. And according to a law professor, that's because some countries, they choose to make changes, regulations, rules from the government side, but they also make efforts on the company side as well. They have their self-regulations as well. So it should be a balanced effort between both the parties.
The company and the government.
Exactly.
And though we still see a lot of manual laborers be in their 50s and 60s and accidents happening in that age group, we're also seeing a lot of young adults take their lives on these fields, right?
That's right. So notably, a growing number of victims are people in their millennials
Like
and Gen
20s and
Z
30s,
and 20s
yes.
and 30s. And that's because the younger population engaging in these arduous jobs, these labor jobs, such as delivery services that have high risk, is increasing continuously. If we take a number back in 2021, it surpassed 400,000 in fact. And very recently too, this was only a month ago, a man in his 20s, he was fixing the elevator and he fell from the elevator and died of this tragic incident. And what's notable here is that the regulation of fixing an elevator wasn't kept. So usually 2 people are supposed to be engaging in these sort of jobs, but he was alone and he asked for help, but he didn't receive the help he needed and ended up dying, which is really tragic.
So tragic. And Kyun, would you like to add on how common these industrial accidents are among our generation?
Yes, another industrial accident occurred in late June at a big supermarket parking lot. A worker in his 30s lost consciousness and eventually died while moving shopping trolleys on a scorching day that recorded highs of like 33 degrees. And it was reported that he took over 43,000 steps in just the space of 10 hours.
43,000 steps.
That's a lot. And he was only given a 15-minute break for every 3 full hours work.
Oh my.
And there was a rest area, but it took them 5 minutes to get there, and they only have 15-minute break time. So apparently nobody actually used that facility. So according to the current government policy, when a heat wave advisory is issued, employers are advised to give employees who are working outdoors 10 to 15-minute rest time for every hour worked, 1 hour.
1 hour, okay.
So obviously this wasn't kept at the supermarket. So members of the Mart Industry Labour Union are calling for the Ministry of Labour to step in to further investigate this incident. And of course, the executives of the big supermarket to come up with better safety measures so that these, tragic things don't happen again.
Right, and the reason why we're covering this on NewsGen is that while we're still seeing a lot of these laborers be in their 40s and 50s, a lot are also turning into their 20s and 30s, and eventually our generation will take up a big part in these industries. And why don't we then find out why a lot of young people are already deciding to do such arduous manual labor jobs currently?
Well, many are choosing to head out to the industrial sectors, but at the same time, there's a trend of the people in their 20s and 30s wanting technical jobs as well. Now, let's take a look at the screen to answer that question. As you see from this chart, 8 out of 10 millennials and Gen Z said they would like to have technical jobs, and there are two main reasons for that. First, the fact that they can earn as much as they are capable of is the reason, and the second reason would be they think they can make the job their thing with the hard to replace skills, because usually these technical jobs, they need special skills. It's not about how much education you received, it's not about your degree, but many of them require certifications, and it's really related to the popularity of STEM majors as well. Right. We're living in the digital transformation area where special skills are required, and these technical jobs, they can't be replaced because they will be the only one with that special skill. And that is why people in their 20s and 30s choose to get these jobs. They want more money.
Right, that's basically a very interesting point you mentioned. Of the blue collar jobs, there are technical jobs, but also there are arduous, like hard labor, manual jobs, right?
Definitely, and many other millennials and Gen Zs, they're willing to work in blue-collar jobs because they feel more value in the actual labor in itself.
Right.
And instead of just being committed to one company for their whole working careers, I think a lot of youngsters like to just move around to gain that diverse experience in the working field, especially in the technical field as well. And another trend we're seeing these days online are many youngsters uploading vlogs of themselves doing like really arduous, demanding manual labor to show that, they have the grit and determination to also succeed in their lives, just like, people with white-collar jobs. And they're really encouraging other youngsters to be, part of this labor force, as they believe all occupations are equally honorable.
And you mentioned a really good point. I think that's why we've seen Statistics Korea find out that instead of finding like full-time jobs, some are actually choosing to pick contract or temporary jobs because they want to move about. But then, of course, there are people that do want to land full-time jobs. So it's a very tricky question here, but we're seeing such a big change in the job industry at the moment. And we also asked our viewers if they have experience trying out these manual labor jobs. And here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. Will Mead and Twistle said, yes, most of my life I've tried them. The problem with doing manual labor in a commercial sense is that some owners, supervisors, contractors, etc. are more concerned about the bottom line and their profit margins, so safety is usually an afterthought. Benny D97 said, manual labor jobs, never so far because maybe it'll be hard for me and it's not my forte. Terrace Bell said, I work in a duct pipe factory. We make the pipes and ship them. There are a lot of safety hazards and concerns. A lot of them are crush related, like people getting crushed between pipes. And you can see that all of our viewers agree that, manual labor jobs are very difficult, arduous, and they cause a lot of safety concerns. And as you guys also mentioned, more young people are seemingly choosing to do blue-collar jobs. And it's always important that we try to keep safe. And in order to find out how we can do that, we're going to include a legal expert in our talks. We'll include her in our talks right after this. To To find out how we can better protect those working in industrial jobs, we're going to include a legal expert in our talks. It's Professor Choi Kyung from Hongik University here in Seoul. Great to have you with us today, Professor Jo.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'd like to ask you the first question. Do you think compared to other parts of the world, South Korea does see a lot of work-related accidents? If so, why?
Yes, we do, unfortunately. Ours, I think you mentioned also in the intro, but our average industrial deaths are roughly 3 or 4 times the OECD average, and we consistently rank in the upper group, which is not a good place to be. And I can say that there are essentially 2 main reasons why the industrial death and accident rate is still very high. First is structural, because since the Asian financial crisis, many companies have decided to cut their workforce that they usually employ and instead subcontract a lot of the work that they do, particularly in construction, which is a very cyclical industry, and heavy industries and manufacturing. And it's those industries where most of the accidents occur through falling, crushing, being squeezed to death, etc. And so that's one structural reason why the rate is very high. And second is, this is very common to a lot of other countries also, but employers are obviously concerned about the bottom margin, and they essentially cut corners and skimp on safety measures. I'm sure you've also seen people, dangling by one single rope, cleaning windows of high-rise buildings. Your reporters also mentioned somebody falling into an elevator shaft and being killed as a result, and they should have actually been working in pairs rather than alone. And so many of the headline accidents that we read in the newspapers and in the media are such accidents that could have been easily avoided if they had taken the proper procedure and followed the course that they should have, instead of trying to skimp. And the reason why they're able to do this is because the penalty and the fines that employers face as a result of industrial accidents and deaths are still very low in our country.
I see.
I like how you mentioned it could be every accident can be prevented if we take the proper measures and procedures and just keep the rules. Now, my second question to you is, I hear that the UK has brought down the number of industrial accidents very effectively. How so, though?
Well, they have brought down the number of accidents effectively, but it actually took a long time. They began their effort to make workplace more safe since the very tragic coal mining town accident back in the 70s. And since then, they've put in tougher measures and better safety regulations, the stronger workplace health and safety laws. But it wasn't until 2007 when they legislated an act called Corporate Homicide and Manslaughter Act, which actually imposed liability on companies and not just individuals for workplace deaths. And that's actually seen a much more effective decrease in rate of industrial accidents. When we think about the fact that we actually have some 2,200 industrial deaths occurring every year, that's what 6, close to 7 people every day who are unable to go home after going to work. You and I are all at work this morning, and you, of course, as a matter of course, expect that you will be able to go home after finishing your work in the office today. But there are half a dozen people who are unable to do that. And when we think about that, that the task that we actually need to do to make workplace more safe, I think comes closer to home.
Yes, Professor, that's very sad to hear. Then speaking from a legal perspective, what is some legislation that needs more work to better prevent or deal with industrial accidents? And how far has South Korea progressed till now?
So we recently, last year, legislated an act called Serious Industrial Accidents Penalty Act. which holds the CEO of a company responsible for industrial deaths that could have been prevented. But now there are already calls to actually water down the legislation, and it's only been a year since its passage. In my view, the law needs to be strengthened because there are lots of loopholes in the law. For example, the Act doesn't apply to workplaces that employ fewer than 5 people because they feel that it's too burdensome for those kind of businesses. But when we consider the fact that so much of the subcontracted work is actually done by small outfits that actually employ fewer than 5 people, and some businesses deliberately structure their business so that they can employ people fewer than in 5 or fewer numbers. They are deliberately trying to avoid the application of the law. But many companies are lobbying the government to try to actually ameliorate or water down the law already. And I think we should actually be going the other way.
Exactly, because as you mentioned, the UK strengthened their legislation, which is why, though it took a very long time, it brought down the number of industrial accidents down for sure. And thank you so much, Professor Cho. It was a pleasure to talk to you today and learn so much from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and as Professor Joe mentioned, I think we need stronger legislation in order to prevent these accidents from happening. Don't you think, you?
Definitely. She mentioned so many great things that need to be worked upon. And I think it's time that we have the different kind of structure of not top bottom, but bottom up kind of, communication work structure, because, a lot of CEOs and owners, they like to kind of manipulate, like she said, like Professor Cho said, like water down and manipulate these kind of laws so they can get away with it. And I think because they have, I guess, a bit more power in the social hierarchy, that they can have this kind of, they can get away with these things. But at the end of the day, I think, every company needs workers, employees to get the business running, and that's why we need to respect the employees as much as the owners and the CEOs. And because at the end of the day, we are the ones that are on site, and we're always putting our lives at risk, so we need to be supported.
Without these people, there's not going to be any results. And Chihi, you mentioned that the company and the government should work close hand in hand, but it seems like they're doing the opposite. They're working in a way so that not a lot of safety measures are kept while efficiency is still there. But hopefully we'll see stronger measures soon. And I think today's topic not only requires a lot of attention, but has also garnered some. Whenever we hear young laborers get hurt or die at the workplace, we see boycott movements against those companies that have taken lives, or waves of condolences on social media, right?
That's right. So we've continuously mentioned that one of the key characteristics of our generation is that we make use of these digital platforms to raise awareness such as these issues. And I think it's really good that whenever accidents happen, it goes viral on social media, and we're able to make a difference that way, which is why our role is really important in changing and making our jobs and workplaces more safe for everyone.
And secure, because as Professor Cho mentioned, while we're here at the workplace every day, there's still half a dozen of people who might not be going home. And our generation is really attentive about this issue because work is a big part that we're thinking of right now. And that's all we have for you today. We'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Choi Ji-hee.
Thank you.
And Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.